Hi everyone, I hope you had a good consolidation week. I really enjoyed reading your learning plans and listening to your oral presentations, and I thought I'd make a recording with some general feedback on your assignments and some things to think about that might help you with assignment 3. I was really impressed with the variety of different experiences that you came up with to address the different focus concepts. It was great to see so many of you using play-based fun activities. This is so important when teaching. Children learn so much more when they're actually enjoying themselves. Your oral presentations were clear and spoken at a good pace for the audience to be able to process what you were saying. And most people also pitched their speeches really well for a parent audience, that is, professional without being too formal or too informal. It's a really tricky tone to achieve, so well done. Okay, so on to some things to think about. Remember that these tips will help you when you're planning the lessons that you need to plan in assignment 3. You'll be using a very similar template, so it would be a good idea to make some notes of what I'm going to say. When you're planning a lesson, you need to think about the lesson in a certain order. Although the template listed the learning activity and then the focus concept and then the curriculum connection, it's important to note that you actually need to decide on your focus concept first so that you know what it is that you're planning to teach. In assignment 3, you are going to be writing 3 lesson plans, one on visual literacy, one on ICT, and one for culture and home language. You're going to need to identify the concept, define it, and describe its role in language development. And this is one of the sections where you're going to need in-text citations. Once you've decided on a focus concept, you need to look at the curriculum and find an appropriate outcome for addressing that concept. You'll always be able to find multiple outcomes that could fit, but just choose one, maybe 2, that you find particularly relevant. Be as specific as you can. In the EYLF, there are both broad outcomes and sub-outcomes. So the broad outcome is something like this. Outcome 1, children have a strong sense of identity, and then you've got the sub-outcomes, which are the outcomes within that. So while it's fine to choose an outcome, such as outcome 5, children are effective communicators, it's important that you look at those sub-outcomes for something specific that relates to your focus concept, so that you're being really specific. In assignment 3, you will be able to use the EYLF or the Australian curriculum. Remember, the EYLF only applies to children before school age. So if your activity is going to be aimed at Foundation to Year 2, you will need to use the Australian curriculum. The Australian curriculum is a notoriously tricky document to navigate, and the only way to get your head around it is actually spending some time having a bit of a look. It's going to be really tempting because of that for you to use the EYLF for all 3 of your lesson plans. I would really discourage you from doing that. Using both documents will help to show the depth of your knowledge. So to be clear, when I'm saying use both documents, I don't mean use both documents in the same learning plan. I mean across your assignment as a whole. You'll only use one curriculum document for each plan. Okay, you have your focus concept and you know which curriculum outcomes you want to address, so it's time to plan your activity. A lesson needs to have an introduction, the main activity, and a conclusion, and each of those needs to be linked to the focus concept. An introduction needs to be more than just saying the teacher will introduce the book. So you need to think about how you'll introduce the activity. In the classroom, there's always some way of easing into an activity, like a warm-up to the main event or something like that. For example, if the students are going to be using the role play corner that's been turned into a birthday party, you might have a conversation with the children about birthdays and parties and the things that you've put in the corner. You'll then need to describe the activity. What will happen? What will you be doing? How will you involve the child or the children in the activity? And this section needs to be really detailed. There needs to be enough information that a relief teacher could come in, pick up your lesson and teach it the way you intended it to be taught. The conclusion to your lesson needs to be more than a transition to the next activity or to lunch. It also needs to be more than what they enjoyed about the lesson. So like the introduction, it needs to be connected to the focus concept. It's a time for reflecting on the learning that's taken place. This might be a discussion or a conversation recapping the learning. It might be a drawing or a painting. It might be sharing the findings of their investigation or what they did and what they learned, or maybe a review of the vocabulary that they have learnt, just to name a few. Okay. When you write a resource list, this is just a simple list of all the things you're going to need for the lesson. You don't need to explain why you need them. You just need a simple dot point list. In fact, a dot point list is preferable to writing it in a sentence. And the reason for that is if you are going to go and teach this and you need to find all of those materials on your resource list, it's much easier to make sure that you have everything you need when you're collecting it. If you've got a dot point list, you can kind of tick it off. All right, definitions are really important. Whether you're explaining something in a folio or in an essay, it's a good idea to provide the definition first and then give the examples so that the reader has something to connect the example to. A few people gave examples and then didn't define. Some people gave examples and defined afterwards, but the best way to get your message across clearly is to define what you're saying and then give your examples after it. Think about this when you're writing your essay. Don't write as if you're writing your essay for me, who would know the meaning of those content words. When you're writing academically, you need to assume that your reader is intelligent, but might not have very much knowledge on the subject that you're writing about. Just like when you started out, if Fellows and Oakley hadn't defined all of those key terms for you, you wouldn't have been able to understand what you were reading. So you're not writing for me. You could be writing for anybody who could pick this up. Okay, just a couple of reminders here about APA referencing. This would be a great page to take a snapshot of so that you know how to set out your reference list and your in-text citations. That's all for now. As always, if you have questions, post them on the discussion board or feel free to send me an email. Thanks, everybody.